this is not the best method in macerating fibres. Obviously the Hollander is, because it tears it rather than chops it. This chops it. There's a bit of tearing, but it's largely chopping. But for small areas where the intrinsic kind of tensile strength is not that important, this is the most convenient. You can't do a big Hollander bead for small repairs. We've got some frozen pulp from the studio, which we'll have a look. I think that's gone through the blender as opposed to the Hollander, but we can have a look at that. But this is the cotton linter, and this is that dark cotton linter paper with an organic dye in. So all you need to do, just prior to blending, soak it in some water, plenty of water, and just cut it up roughly into some smaller pieces because it's easier to work with. Stick it in the blender. This will produce a lot of stock solution. Just be careful with this, but I would put the cloth on the top because it can spurt out. It's important not to leave it for ages in the blender because the motor can run out and burn out. Stock solution, but it's far too thick at the moment, and you see too clumpy to pipette or use through the. I haven't used this before, so it might not be suitable. Can I just get another bead? See what it looks like when it's diluted. So when we're pulping something, we probably only use about that much, and then lots of water. That's much better. So you've got a much more dispersed slurry now with no significant lumps. It's where a lot of people go wrong with this technique. They have it too thick. So that the heavy bits of the pulp will fall to the bottom. So you agitate the top, but you take the pulp generally from the top section, particularly when you're pipetting. So this is my experimental piece. So this is, I'm using the sample paper that I've given you. Now you would prepare your paper ahead of time by spraying it and relaxing like we did yesterday. So they're kind of lamination flattening techniques. And then you need to support it on a very fine membrane. This is Bondina, because you have to allow the pulp to go through freely. But what we don't want is the characteristics. You see this honeycomb characteristic of the bed to show through. So we layer up 1 or 2 layers of this in order to diminish that. You might want to exploit it, but we try and avoid it. So the object's nice and relaxed, spray relaxed, then position it over the hole that's cut out. The pressure's engaged slightly, but it gets quite noisy when it's on. Then you need to position your box over the aperture. Now it's a bit of trial and error, and obviously you would do some experimental work before you start on your design. This is the darker pulp I'm using to contrast. But we would probably, in order to get the same kind of level of pulp, we'd probably use about a quarter of this, pour it in. Okay, now I just need to engage these so it will be a bit noisy. So you can easily clear away any additional fibres by just pulling it with the tweezers or rolling action. But let's just spread it down. So don't air dry it, always put it under some pressure whilst the hydrogen bonding forms, otherwise it will detach if you just let it right naturally. But we need to increase the fabric there. We've got some other types of fabric we can try as well, like clearing matting. But that should diminish anyway when it's dry. So, I mean, it's very, very quick to fill a void. But you can obviously increase the density, different colours. That's the casting rod. Another technique you could use is casting a thin layer of pulp, then pressing it, letting it dry. Then you can put colorants in that local area, chalk, that sort of thing, and then cast over it a second time. So you get a very unusual kind of nuance of colours and tones. We do that when we have artworks that are multi-tone throughout a large area of gloss. And you can increase the opacity that way as well. But it's much more natural than a coloured pulp just placed on the top. So you can layer up with all sorts of colours or chalks. You can experiment. Or if you wanted to, you could put some polymers on to size it, to make it more waterproof and you can draw into it. You can put, with this very soft pulp, you can impregnate, texture, lines, floss, dental floss, I don't know, to give shape and definition to it. There's lots of permutations to it.
Did you dump the artwork first?
Always work. You have to work with damp artwork. It doesn't have to be sodden, but otherwise it will cause plane distortions across the object. You have a very wet area, and then dry, so you'll get distortions. I mean, I suppose you could pulp it quite dry on a dry piece of paper and then relax the whole thing, but it may dislodge the pulp later. So that's for speed, and for larger areas, or for multiple areas, or just that you like to do it. But if you want to work more delicately on an area, then the pipette is the best way. So, dampen artwork. I'll put some extra layers in. You've got the little packs on the table, by the way, of furnishing materials and cotton bud.
row, a piece of paper like that, you know,
If you lined it, yes, I mean you could, yes, definitely, but probably be supporting on the back, more long-term stability. But not having the pulp too thick, that's an important thing. It takes longer, obviously, to cast, but if it's really thick, you'll just get big chunks of pulp. You may want that, but it is much more lumpier effect. But if you want something quite lacy, you could do that. I suppose you could also put like lacy templates underneath and then cast the box over. So if you had, instead of just a sheet of this, you could have a pattern cut out, and then when you add the pulp through that aperture, then you'll get a lacy design effect. There's all sorts of things you can do. So relax your object down as per usual, as we did earlier this week. So it needs to be damp, and it's probably better to cast the pulp with the object face down, so your design area face down with this. Obviously cover your light box over so you don't get electrocuted with the water. So the pulp is the stock solution, so it's not diluted as much as the one through the casting box. And you just simply spoon it out. It's quite tricky really, but you get some nice thick pulp and then just place it in the centre. And you probably need tweezers or some fine material. Can you see this? Do you want to come a bit closer and then you can see what I'm doing? So you're going to have problems, more problems anyway, with thicker pulp. And it's not so finely dispersed, I should say. But you need to pull it over the aperture, so when the pulp starts shrinking, it's got something to key onto, otherwise it will just fall out. So you can manipulate that into place with quite a lot of water. Press it. It's always good to use the heel of your wrist. And then you just carry on building it up. So for more rustic effects, this is okay, but it's not as refined, obviously. You could try the pipette as well, but you probably need a much thinner. You might be able to pipette areas on as well. It's not so easy, really. It looks worse with the light going through. It's quite wet, this technique. It's possible, you know, with due care to work. Reasonable effect. So low angle. So very rustic, really. Obviously, with it being a darker colour, it emphasises the faults a little bit. Let's get some more. You can get, but it's not as refined as the other. It is much wetter. This probably, it's possible, and with a bit more care and building up the areas. Well, obviously, I've not spent much time doing that, but you know, everybody has an access to a light box, and anybody can pulp. So it's possible. But you definitely need to press it and ensure that the hydrogen bonding is set in.
So you put the surface that you're working on face down, did you say? So that's...
Yes, I think if you want, I mean, unless you want an overspill of the pulp, but it won't be so neat. But it may be something that...
And you know, you mentioned about embedding colour. So would you be able to use this technique for doing that? Just put a little bit on, and then how would you add
yes.
colour?
I would add a little bit, then press it dry, and then add your colour as if you were using watercolour.
Oh, literally? Is that
Yes, and apply the pigment in situ,
Okay.
and then pulp over the top. Or chalk, so you can get really quite...
But just fine pastels, so you could just...
Yes, you could grate pastels or just apply it with a stump or brush, or acrylic, although you might find that the pulp, I'm not sure how the pulp will sit on top of that, but certainly watercolours, you know, you could put all sorts of patterns or colour fields on, and then pulp over, and how thin the pulp is and the colour of the pulp will give you those kind of nuances of colour coming through.
Or you can use that, what you've got in those.
Or you could pre-dye them and then do different colours one on top of the other. But you can have vivid colours underneath and then white on top, so you get that, you know, wonderful glow underneath, which is much more successful really than just a block colour on the top. So another modification of it. You can use a natural sponge as well to pat it down. It's better to use Japanese fibres, which are much longer for this technique. So I've just blitzed a small piece like that in the blender as the stock solution. And you can see the fibres are much longer. If you want to pass over there, they're much longer. Now we don't want them in a big pot like that, so what I tend to do is just with a small little sieve in a petri dish or a small shallow saucer, just put some fibres with a reasonable amount of water, because you need to draw the fibres up the side, so you use the surface tension of the water to pull out the individual fibres. Now it's a good idea to work on some black paper underneath, and you need to have a sheet of glass or perspex to lay your fibres on. But you'll go mad if you're working on a light support with white fibres. Obviously you can dye the fibres before you start, and because you're using them very, very dry and attaching them very dry, the colour is least likely to liberate out, because you're using very, very dry application of paste. So you start off by, so you need some good tweezers, and I would recommend you getting something like that. They're about £10, and you know Peacocks? I think, well, they used to sell them anyway. You know the back of Marks and Spencer's? Have you ever been there? Back of Marks and Spencer's, there's a kind of orthopaedic shop, weird shop that has things like this.
Oh, yes.
Medical supplies.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
So they're between £8 and £10, but they're really worth it, and they're nice and flexible. So I've got the slurry here, so I'm going to pull out individual fibres. So the best way is you can tease them out on your fingers as well and draw them into slightly longer linear shapes. Can you see that? Or if you get up, you can probably see them better. So I tend to lie them on a sheet of glass to see what the shape is. And you can correct the shape by pulling them and compressing them, depending on whether you want them very, very thin or very thick or whatever, or slightly bulbous in the middle. You might want all sorts of shapes, but you can literally tweeze them into the shape whilst they're still damp, and they will hold on this sheet of glass until you're ready to use them. Now, if you want a very, very neat effect, when they're dry, and they have to be dry, otherwise you can pull too much of the fibre away, then you can use a small knife just to chop the ends off so it's nice and regular, and they could all be the same size if you wanted. So you can just literally take the ends off like that. You may want them more sinewy and more organic, but you can trim them at this stage. Now, the artwork is normally dry, so that's a good thing as well if you've got existing design on there. And also, it's very good if you've got something with double-sided, so if you're working or want to view both sides as part of the aesthetics, then this is a very good way of holding, you know, slits together or small apertures, or as a decorative element. Okay, so we need some paste with this because we apply them usually dry. So I've got some thick wheat starch paste like we used the other day, and I tend to just put a thin layer on blotting paper so I don't have any lumps, because you don't want any big lumpy bits with these tiny creatures. So you can do it different ways. You can apply the adhesive to the ends. You can apply the adhesive all along if you want more contraction, or you can apply in situ on the artwork if you know where it's going to be positioned. It's probably easy when you're working with them the first time is to apply the adhesive along the fibre entirely, and then you have to lift them up. I've done a slightly thicker one so you can see what I'm doing. Invert it, and then grab hold of it with the end of your finger and then lay it down. And take some bondina and just make sure that it's a good bond. Burnish it down. Okay? And then you carry on. You can do it at different distances if you want. It's not terribly neat. I've obviously done it in a rush, but you know, you can get much neater effect than that. So you can do tiny, tiny, tiny ones like that. Do to broader. Use different coloured papers. It's quite strong.
And when would you use this in conservation to actually marry?
So if we have a tear, particularly on very fine, this is a late 18th century fragment of Japanese paper calligraphy. It's very fragile because it's got calligraphy on both sides. We don't want a big support on the back which might interfere, so we put little stitches. And then you can tone them. I use crayon, as long as you're not too aggressive, otherwise it goes very shiny. But if you're going through different colour passages, then you can just tone the little stitches with crayon in situ, just to make it blend in better. So
It's amazingly strong.
it is very strong.
Two or three.
Yeah. I mean, you can quite, pull them apart. So you could join two separate pieces of paper, if you had, especially Japanese paper. If you had two sheets, you could join them like that, or slashes, or grid patterns, all sorts of things you could do. So that's Japanese fibres.